Welcome, everyone. This is the first night of the Festival of Friendship 2020, and our first event, we're going to take a look at four amazing saints, all bearing the name Teresa. Our first guest tonight is a good friend of mine, Daniel Mammarella. We're going up north of the border. He is an educator in Toronto, Canada, and a regular contributor to CatholicStand.com. Hey, Daniel.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh. It's quite an honor that I was invited to speak.
Well, I thought it was kind of cool. Not only do you know about St. Teresa of Avila, the first saint we're going to be taking a look at tonight, you actually have a pretty cool connection to a Carmelite monastery. St. Teresa of Avila was a member of the Carmelite order.
Right, yes. Actually, before I begin to say anything about it, I would like to publicly thank the Carmels of St. Joseph. It's located in St. Agatha, Ontario. The convent is about 1.5 hours from Toronto in these rolling hills of farmland that surround the city. The nuns of Carmel have been my friends for about 15 years now. I met them actually at that time. There was a young postulant who was preparing to enter, and I would drive her out to the convent once a month. She didn't have a license or a car. So I would take her out there once a month, and then she finally entered, and she's taken her vows, and she's a large part of the community out there. The sisters are very close to my heart, and I interviewed the nuns, the sisters, before I decided to speak. I spoke today, and you had asked me. I spoke to them, and I wanted to know more about what their experience was living the Carmelite spirituality, and they call Mother St. Teresa their mother. And it seems like she still walks the halls of that convent, the way they speak about her, because she's so close to their heart.
That's amazing. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the Carmelites, that's the only religious order in the Catholic Church that actually doesn't have a single founder.
No, they came from the Middle East, from Jerusalem, and they spread out into Europe. After the Crusades. There was some difficulty living there. And then when they moved in throughout Europe, many bishops, local bishops, wanted a Carmelite in their diocese. They were quite sought after. But the reforms started, three factors played into St. Teresa's work. One was the Reformation, and then the subsequent Inquisition, and also the Black Death that spread throughout Europe. I mean, remember, the time she lived in Europe in the 1500s, she was born in 1515, and she grew up in a wealthy family of Avila, Spain. She had this pious upbringing. She was actually quite beautiful, but one inhibition to her prospects for marriage, one was that she was a converso. She was she had an ancestor, a grandparent who was someone who converted from Judaism to Catholicism. So that was one that would have been an inhibition for her. And according to the nuns in Carmel that I spoke to, she actually really didn't want to be married. And she was looking for another road. It's just that her father wasn't really happy about her thinking about becoming a nun. And he said, after I die, you can do whatever you want. But she was still very much interested in she was looking at religious life, but she wasn't really fascinated by it. But I think even God can work with not the greatest of intentions, and he can still turn it into something that would help the church, and he can perfect it. And I think she responded to that call.
What about the order needed reforming, and specifically, what was she proposing? My understanding is there was some pushback against what she was proposing.
There's always pushback. I think every saint has pushback or complaints, but St. Teresa, when she went into the convent, they were living a quite worldly existence. And some of the nuns had retained their wealth. They had servants, even a lapdog. They wore jewelry and perfume.
These were nuns?
Well, they were nuns, but see, there was a lax in the religious practice. A lot of it stemmed from the turmoil of the Reformation and also of the Black Death. The Black Death caused a lot of problems in Europe, just the way I think the pandemic causes some turmoil today in the church. Sure. back then it was very difficult. And there was she wanted something more. And she was helped by it, St. John of the Cross, St. Peter of Alcantara. But she said, I wanted to go back to this simplicity, this strict poverty, this self-denial. And that's where the word discalced, or the barefoot Carmelites, came in. And she was granted permission um, to start her own convent. And she really had no intention of having this new order develop. That wasn't her intention at the beginning. She just wanted to have one convent with this simplicity of life. One thing that struck me with the Carmelites live, I visited Gethsemane, which is a Trappist monastery in Kentucky, and people are getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning to pray. Well, the Carmelite nuns of St. Agatha, they don't get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. St. Teresa wanted them to have a good night's rest so they could work well during the day. So they would do their prayers before they went to bed at 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And then they would be up at 5 o'clock and they would have time for recollection. And you even see them when I visit them, they're behind the bars, but I can still shake their hand. But you see, they walk around with no socks on. They wear sandals. And it's more symbolic. They don't eat meat. When I go to the convent, sometimes they'll feed me. They'll give me meat, but they don't eat it. It's just part of their call to simplicity. And it's not as if they're doing any type of self-torture. It's self-denial, that nothing can distract them with their love for Christ. And that's the beauty of the convent, and that's the beauty of St. Teresa's spirituality. But of course, there's pushback. Nobody wants to say, "Oh, I can't have gentlemen callers," and nobody wants to hear that. They want to hear, "Let me do what I want." Well, no, St. Teresa wanted something more, and her discalced Carmel began to spread because people realized, yes, this reform is possible.
Now, her spirituality was very simple, but she was known to actually have some outward manifestations, ecstasies and that kind of thing.
Well, she even levitated, and she would tell the nuns, "Hold me down." She was quite embarrassed, and she would have these visions of her speaking with Christ, and it became, and she wrote everything down. She's documented everything. She actually has a very good spiritual biography, and she documented everything that happened to her. But the reality was that she was embarrassed of all these things happening to her. This ecstasy, and and there's a painting actually of her ecstasy in Rome, and I think that was part of the opposition from the church. That was just impossible. And especially a woman of the day, she was quite well regarded, but still, a woman in the 1500s having this kind of connection to God, this spiritual life, and she wanted this poverty, this austerity, this solitude, but that wasn't happening. This solitude, because people were so drawn to her, and this constant relationship that she developed with Christ. She calls it a spiritual marriage to God, and they really are daughters of Christ. They're spouses of Christ.
You mentioned the fact that she was a woman, and that even though people who knew her regarded her very highly, but the fact that there were ecstasies and the levitation, that she was eventually, she came to the attention of the Spanish Inquisition.
They did investigate her, and they said, they even accused her that the skepticism became so real, that so intense, that they actually thought that a lot of this was from the devil. And this is the this period of time, this medieval superstition that, something that is so good, it's not possible. And that was unfortunate. They considered her to be a bit dangerous, and because visionaries at that time were burned at the stake. It was this resistance to something that was so real. But look at what happened. The evidence is that even while she was alive, People were drawn to her, but the evidence is what happened after she died, that she became a saint quite quickly. By 1970, Paul VI, he made her a doctor of the church, and he recognized her contributions in that time. She was asked by her confessors and spiritual directors to write about her life and her spiritual experiences. She loved St. Augustine. She had read about him, but she also had a spiritual director and a confessor. And she was asked by both of them to write about her life and her spiritual experiences. And she obeyed with a charity, not with a blind obedience. And she remarkably displayed a rare talent for writing, very profound, very human, warm, witty. Choose an adjective. And she left the church several great books of her life, The Foundations, The Way of Perfection, and The Interior Castle. It was so deep the way she grasped the ways of God and prayer. And I see that when I visit the Carmelite nuns that I know today. They almost seem mystical, that from because they read about St. Teresa's interior castle and these ways of perfection. So she left behind not just a collection of physical monasteries and convents that have become a symbol of love in this tortured world that we're living in. She taught us never to be scandalized by the faults of others, because we all have this capacity to fall. And she understood, just like St. Augustine did, that it takes a long time to go deeper and deeper into the spiritual life. And we grow in the certainty that God loves us. So despite this opposition in the Inquisition, despite living at a very tumultuous time, she still lived with that certainty that God really does love us. And she struggled, like so many of these saints. We live in this on-time delivery world. We order on Amazon, we get it the next day. Well, no, she said her struggle became more spiritual, and she always proved herself to be faithful. And when I asked the Carmelites about it, they have this. Their response to me was the same thing. We love Christ, and we live for Him, and we live with Him, and they want to live a life of prayer that makes them worthy. So even the Carmelite nuns who have this daily work of taking care of chickens and cleaning and cooking, and that they maintain a vast parcel of land, their work is prayer. That's what St. Teresa taught them. They have this intimacy. And one incident in the convent recently, the Mother Superior, who was Mother Superior for 10 years, she's no longer the Superior. They had elections, and a new mother was elected with humility, the same humility that St. Teresa of Avila had. You can have this change of leadership, but still love and live with the other sisters in the convent. Out of 20 nuns that live there, they have 4 vocations. That's a high percentage. And you know that St. Teresa of Avila wanted her nuns to be friends in this spiritual life, which is not automatic. I think that's something we learn in Communion Liberation, that friendship is not automatic. And she wanted her nuns to work, but more importantly, she wanted them to pray. How often do we ask God for help and then become dissatisfied with His response? All the time. But St. Teresa reminded us God's wisdom and His mercy and our perseverance in prayer. He knows our suffering. But we have to continue to trust, and that's exactly what she did. In her bravery, they found a bookmark. Let nothing disturb you, nothing frighten you, all things pass. God does not change. Patience achieves everything. And the beauty of St. Teresa of Avila, and why she's a doctor in the church, why she's an example for all of us, not because she's just a Carmelite, but because what she left behind for us to read, it's still important for us to read today. Christ and God are at the heart of the church. Christ is the love in the church. If you love God, then you want to be friends with Him. And this was what she was teaching us. And I was quite struck by this young woman who had to live in a very difficult period but her writings and her work and her spirituality is timeless.
Daniel Mammarella, thank you so much for sharing with us this evening.
No, thank you. I was very happy.
We'll include some links so people can check out your articles at catholicstand.com. Daniel, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I have my friend Francesca Solano here to speak with us about St Thérése of Lisieux, who seems to be a close personal friend of hers and of mine. So I'm really excited about this conversation. Hi, Francesca. Nice to see you.
You too. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's wonderful. I wanted to ask you because I was able to see a earlier version of this presentation, which is why I asked you to take part. And I was wondering, what inspired you to do that? Did somebody ask you, or was it just a movement of your heart, or what brought all of that about? I don't know the backstory to it.
Yeah, I think I try as best as I can to get out of doing as many things as I can. So I would not voluntarily put together a presentation on anything, but we were having a retreat with university students, and it was right at the beginning of COVID. So it was in March, and we had a lot of questions among ourselves, professors, but also students, sort of like, what was this situation asking of us? And I always tried to look at the saints, and a friend said to me, why don't you give a presentation on the saints? I've been recording some pieces of Cyril Martindale's book about the saints for the kids to listen to. And he said, why don't you give one of these presentations? And I went to Therese because, yeah, she's one of my favorites, and I thought she had a lot to tell us in that time of lockdown. Absolutely.
Fantastic. And you expressed, when you gave the talk that I heard, that she was particularly helpful to us right now because of the fact that she is the patron of missionaries. And that's interesting, since she was somebody who stayed put, who lived a very circumscribed life. So can you tell us more about that? How did that come to pass, or what does it mean for all of us?
Yeah, I think it's a profound challenge to all of us, actually. I think that's what's wonderful about Therese in general. So just as, again, to take a step back, Therese lived all of her life within about 100 square kilometers. And she lived until the age of 24. So a short life in a small place with absolutely no big events. And yet she is, along with St. Francis Xavier, if who him, he went everywhere, right? He went to Japan, he went to China. He didn't end up getting into China, but he went to India. He went everywhere to spread the faith. He baptized thousands of people. And you think, like, how does a woman who doesn't go anywhere and doesn't do anything end up in that same category? And I think they are not, so first I think Therese has something to teach us, of course, as you asked me, which is that life is to be given, and not just in a very intimistic way between you and God, but that every giving of yourself inevitably involves all of your brothers and sisters, those whom you know and those whom you don't know. She said at one point, bending down to pick up a pin can save a soul. This profound sense of connection between what I do and everybody else in the world, starting with the people in the church, my brothers and sisters in baptism. And I think there is a very shocking. I mean, we can think of Brebeuf and we can think of missionaries and we say, wow, great stories, and that's far. But to think that doing your dishes, or sewing on a button, or dealing with your husband or wife that annoys you, or changing a diaper again, can save the soul of somebody in another part of the world, is just, we don't believe that. I don't think most of us. And yet the church is saying, like, yeah, it's so true. it's so true that like we put in front of you, you know, Christians, we put in front of you this woman to tell you, yeah, this is real, this is true, this is how it actually is. Open your eyes to this. And I think that that's a profoundly challenging vision of what it means to be a Christian, perhaps more so than, you know, being burnt at a stake, because it's so ordinary.
It's interesting because I'm a catechist, so I've had a lot of kids and even adults ask me, well, how does that really work? What is the mechanism whereby I can pick up a pen and save a soul on the other side of the globe? What, you know, what's the pathway that my intention follows such that it can work that way? And I've become really profoundly moved by the scripture passage, John chapter 15, 1 through 11, where he speaks about the true vine. I am the vine and you are the branches. And it's this beautiful image of unity that I think informs St. Paul's vision of the mystical body of Christ, where we're all connected as though in one organism, let's say, so that if, you know, I get an infection in my finger, my whole body has a fever. Yeah. And likewise, if you cure that infection, my body's restored. And so, so I've talked with kids about that. It seems as though Therese had this profound understanding of this concept, even to the point where she said, you know, I'm going to spend my eternity helping souls, you know, so even when she's removed from the planet, yeah, she has this sense of being intimately attached to all these people, including, may I say, people she might have disagreed with, people, yeah, who could even be considered her enemies. Can you talk about that a little bit, like her relationship with her sisters in the convent, and how an understanding of this unity of the body of Christ could help her to overcome this sort of controversies or problems of the day?
Yeah, it's my favorite part, because after, you know, after 2 months of lockdown, I think we were all sort of feeling at the end of our ropes even with the people whom we loved the most. And I think the first thing that you have to think about, because I think it's important to say this, like, if you try to read Therese, I think I said this in some of the presentations, if the first time you try to read Therese, you feel almost like it's so saccharine, like it's just too much sweetness. It's got like this 19th century French, like super frilly language that you say, like, okay, and you want to just throw that book away when you, at least I did. And then the more that you get into it and the more you learn about her, the more that you see that this extremely, you know, frilly, almost, I would say, girly, like hypersensitive, you know, woman exists as also an extremely ironic person. So she has a wonderful sense of humor, and B, as an extremely, she's steely, like she's very, very tough. So I say that in preparation to say that, like, for her, the more we learn that it was hard for her to live in her particular cloister with those sisters, that it seems that, you know, that particular monastery, that Carmelite monastery, was not especially well disciplined, was not particularly following the rule all that well. And she says, I think I have it here, if I could, she says it at a certain point in the letter about her own sisters. She writes, the lack of judgment, education, the touchiness of some characters, all these things do not make life very pleasant. I know very well that these moral weaknesses are chronic, that there is no hope of a cure. So not particularly, you know, very an uplifting message about her fellow sisters. And yet immediately for her, this idea that we talked about, like picking up a pin that can, you know, heal something in the body of Christ. There's a way that you can do that and skip over the people nearest to you, so that I'm offering this and it's going to affect these people I don't know across the world, and which is great, but then I want to kill the person beside me and, because I hate him, and that's that. And that is the part that we're scandalized by. And it's also the part that we don't know what to do with the most. And Therese has this wonderful way of saying, like, she doesn't hold any punches. I mean, she says, like, I don't like this person, or I find this particular person extremely difficult. And precisely because of that, she will be the occasion of my expression of my love for Christ. So the most famous, story of this, if you've read the story of the soul, is that she decides to befriend the sister whom she finds not like the worst, but the most annoying, which I find wonderful, because it's like, it's true. If you hate somebody, it's almost less frustrating than somebody that you find just annoying. And I'll read you this, because I think it shows all of her irony and all of her realism and all of the reachable nature of this sanctity, where she says, there is in the community a sister who has the faculty of displeasing me in everything, in her ways, her words, her character. Everything seems very disagreeable to me. And still, she is a holy religious who must be very pleasing to God. I told myself that charity must not consist in feelings, but in works. Then I set myself to doing for this sister what I would do for the person I loved the most. Frequently, when I had occasion to work with this sister, I used to run away like a deserter when my struggles became too violent. Never did she suspect the motives for my conduct, and she remained convinced that her character was very pleasing to me. One day she asked, would you tell me, Sister Therese, what attracts you so much toward me? Every time you look at me, I see you smile. What attracted me was Jesus, hidden in the depths of her soul. Jesus, who makes sweet what is most bitter. I answered that I was smiling because I was happy to see her. I did not add that this was from a spiritual standpoint, which is, I just think, a wonderful conclusion. And I think that brings Therese together for you. Why does she do this? Because she loves Jesus. Because Jesus is somebody who's alive. Because Jesus is somebody who's alive in his body, right? And so that's a judgment for her. That's like, this is the truth about things, whether I like you or don't like you or whatever. And to love Jesus, I need to love you. But I'm not going to I'm not going to pretend that it's easy. I'm not going to say that everything's the same. There's people that I like more and people I like less. And yet, like, I understand that not only am I called to love you, but that the difficulty of loving you is precisely the occasion for me to love Jesus more. And I find that so realistic. It doesn't leave out any of the aspects of being human.
Do you have any other examples of her being steely?
Being what, steely? Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, there's tons, right?
Yeah, some more. We want to hear about her being tough.
There's the fact that she takes on what she calls a little way, and she decides to do all of these sacrifices in secret. And she often gets accused, of doing things that she hasn't done. She gets accused of breaking a jar, and she doesn't say, I didn't do that. Which I always said when I presented this, I would find that so much harder than, you hurting me, would be you accusing me of something I didn't do and not saying it wasn't me, right? I mean, that's just unthinkable for me. She says, there's a wonderful, I found this, if you think about the days we had in lockdown and the days we will have now, the days that mothers especially are having right at home, like where you're burning the candle from both ends and you have to take care of the kids and you have to go to work. And she says, when I can feel nothing, when I am altogether arid, I seek tiny occasions, real trivialities to give joy to my Jesus. A smile, for example, or a friendly word, when I would rather be silent or look bored. I prefer the monotony of obscure sacrifice to all ecstasies. This like opting for the practical, real sacrifice rather than these wonderful feelings seems to me the steeliness of her daily life. And then, of course, I would say, if for those who know, she went through what we call the dark night of the soul, which is a profound period of darkness in which you do not perceive at all the presence of this God. And for someone who lived a very short life, you imagine that living years in that darkness and never budging from what is a judgment, right? Like Christ is real and he is here. And there is nothing that can be objected to. Once I've met him, I can't get over that. Or her father, who lost his wife when she was quite young, and then all of his daughters went into religious life, and as we know, he's now been canonized as well. But he lost his mind, essentially, at the end of his life. He was paralyzed and he lost his mind. And I think of her being trapped in a cloister. And she loved her. Half of the story of the soul is just about her affection for her father. I think of us who, some of us can't see our parents right now. And I think of the sense of guilt that you would have, and the sense of, am I doing the right thing? And she stays. So these are just a few instances.
Those are really helpful because they also help us to begin to look at our present moment and see how she might be of help to us. I had a question in mind also that I'll ask, but you could skip my question if you prefer to just run ahead to speaking a little bit more about how we can meet her here in our present difficulty, because you've already touched on that a lot. But I want to ask my question out loud, which is this. I know that at the very end of her life, she was, sick in bed in her cell. She was dying. She was on the verge of death. And it was a tradition among the Carmelites that when a sister died, they would send a circular letter to all of the convents announcing the person's death and giving an account of who they were and what they had accomplished. And out in the hallway, two sisters were talking about Therese and didn't realize that she could hear. But as she's lying there dying, one said to the other, when her letter comes around, they're not going to have anything to write. What are they going to say about her? What has she done? And the other one said, no, nothing. And I find that really moving when I think about how popular she became. And of course, probably these sisters didn't have access to her writings as they became available to the public. But can you, so my question is, how do we account for this immense popularity for somebody who wasn't so striking to the people around her at the time? She seems pretty ordinary.
Yeah, this is such a great question, and I don't know that I have an answer, because it is like a fascinating. I should confess that I look at this automatically as a historian. That's my profession, and I keep looking. I just did the French Revolution with my, introductory level students. And so when I was thinking about talking to you about this again, I thought, man, like 1873, she's born in 1873. That's less than 100 years after the French Revolution. And we know, that's a moment of a total attempt to destroy like all traces of the Christian past of that country and that place. And there's a part of me that wonders, so these are all my hypotheses. I have no evidence for these feelings, and I want to be clear about them. But there are a few things that I wonder. I think, first of all, this is the beginning of a rise of literacy, right? So these are like, more people can access these kinds of texts at this period. The Story of a Soul comes out pretty shortly after her death. And it's a text that you can access easily. It's short. It has great stories, right? And it's accessible. Like, you feel like it's somebody that's like you, that is still that's also in another world, but in your world, right? So on one side, I think it's a text that is very accessible for the regular person of the time. I think it's filling a spiritual gap of the people of the time, right? Like, this is like the late 19th century. This is like the height of positivism, the height of like, all kinds of attempts to say that none of this stuff matters anymore. And if you see someone like her, who's born in a bourgeois family, like lives a regular bourgeois life, spends a few years in a monastery and becomes a saint, I think it feels like it's somebody like you. She's not some crazy mystic. She's not, she's like you. She was born, she lived a good life, she's spoiled, she whatever, and she can become a saint. And then I just think there's something about her. I think that there's something about her that it's so strange to me that men, for example, should find her so fascinating, because she's so utterly feminine that you're like, why would men find this so fascinating? Or if you read Heather King's book, I don't know if you know Heather King, but like she wrote this great book on Teresa of Lisieux, and she's a recovering addict, and you see this like that this super flowery woman can speak to her. So she has something to say to all of us. And then I'll add, I don't want to talk too much on this, but I do think it is really interesting. Therese has a lot of aspects that people of the time would have called like nervous maladies. They would have called them some kind of like psychological difficulty. And people like Carol Houselander and Heather King talk about this aspect of Therese, that she carries a lot of mental suffering. She carries a lot of mental anguish. And I wonder sometimes if that's also something that speaks to people more and more, that this is the scourge of our time, is not so much the physical poverty, but this mental anguish. And to feel that there's a saint who has been somehow there with you can be very comforting. So these are all the things that I meditate on, and I have no idea if they're real. Those are my thoughts.
I deeply appreciate it. To wrap up, since we're already near the end of our time, I guess I'd like to ask you for the most essential aspect of her life or her witness or her writings that can speak to us right now, today, particularly in our current circumstances. So what would you say, just to wrap everything up and sort of help us focus in on the one important, most essential?
Yeah, I would say we have to listen to her when she says, my vocation is love. That none of these things, none of these, the little way, it means nothing without love. And the love is for Jesus. And if you love Jesus, it is, you cannot but love the members of his body, no matter how difficult. And then I would say that aspect of the connection between my little gesture and the whole world is something that is so revolutionary, and that we, I think, want to skip over in favor of grander things, in favor of things that seem more effective and efficient. And we're so much the victim of these ways of thinking. And that you need to let yourself be made uncomfortable by Therese, made uncomfortable by the idea that bending down to pick up a pen could save a soul. And that's real. That's not a figure of speech.
Thank you. That really helps. I'm really grateful to you. Thank you so much.
Hello, Festival of Friendship friends. Simone Rascala here. I am so excited and honored to talk to you today about St. Edith Stein, one of my favorite boss saints. Gosh, where do I even begin? Well, first I should just give you a little short introduction to who I am. My name is Simone Rascala, and I currently work as Director of Program Growth for an organization called ENDOW, which stands for Educating on the Nature and Dignity of Women. So we basically create study guides and organize women into small groups to study Catholic philosophy and theology, with a particular emphasis on the feminine genius and boss saints like St. Edith Stein and St. Teresa of Avila, St. Catherine of Siena, St. Hildegard, and so forth. So this is obviously another reason why I am so excited to talk to you about St. Edith Stein. I know this has to be a little bit of a short talk, so please forgive all of the gaps that I'm going to leave out, and let this be a little appetizer to hopefully the beginning of your own friendship with St. Edith Stein. When I look at all of St. Edith Stein's transformations, it's pretty remarkable. She went from a devout Jewish woman to an atheist at the age of 14. And actually, as a fellow Catholic, I find it interesting that she has something to say for Catholics today, because the average age that Catholics leave today is 13, which is very interesting. So she goes from being a devout Jewish woman to an atheist, to studying philosophy and becoming a philosopher in her own right, making proposals about the feminine soul and the feminine genius. We really can credit her with the theology behind that inspired John Paul II, to her conversion to Catholicism and her Carmelite vocation. So actually, through another boss saint, St Teresa of Avila, through reading St Teresa of Avila in one night, she kind of sealed the deal on her Catholic conversion. She closed St. Teresa of Avila's book and said, "This is the truth," and became a Catholic. And then later on, joined St. Teresa of Avila's order, the Carmelites, and became a cloistered Carmelite. And then eventually she became a martyr and a saint. So on August 9th, 1942, she was sent to Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp, and the Nazis put her in a gas chamber and murdered her. And later, John Paul II canonized her as a saint and as a martyr. So we see this kind of like epic transformation in her short life, from a Jew to an atheist, to a philosopher, to a Catholic, to a Carmelite nun, to a martyr, and to a saint. The other thing that's really striking about Edith Stein, besides all these transformations, is everything that she suffered. So she lost her father at a very young age. She lost the relationship with her mom when she entered the Carmelite cloister. She served as a nurse in World War I and suffered that. Obviously, she lost her life and her family's lives in World War II through National Socialism, through Nazism. And she, as a philosopher and as a teacher, didn't get jobs as a university professor because she was a Jew. So she was a victim of anti-Semitism, and as a woman, and also a victim of sexism. But I actually don't like classifying Edith Stein, who's a boss saint, as a victim, because in fact, all of these kind of negative, not kind of negative, very negative circumstances that she had to live were all shaping and crafting her to the saint that she became. I also forgot to mention that she struggled with depression for a while. So we really see a woman that is so relatable to us on so many levels, definitely had history against her, but allowed her life to be shaped by God and became a saint because of it. A Dutch official in Birkenau says this of Edith Stein, and in observing her in the concentration camp. He said, "For a couple of days, she lived in that hellhole, walking, talking, and praying like a saint." And she really was one. During one conversation, she told me, "For now, the world consists of opposites, but in the end, none of these contrasts will remain. There will only be the fullness of love." So I think she's very relevant to all of us, and relevant to me, because when I look at my life and I can see all of the negativity and the negative circumstances, but that doesn't have to be an obstacle. And it's not even despite them, but through them, that God can craft all of our lives into the masterpieces that he has destined for us. So I think about St. Paul in his letter to the Romans, when he says that for those who love God, all things are working out for their good and for their glory. So for the remainder of this short talk, I would like to bring out 5 value points that I think can be really great takeaways from Edith Stein's life. Oh, before I do that, I want to quote John Paul II when he says that all men and women are entrusted with the task of crafting their own life. In a certain sense, they are to make of it a work of art, a masterpiece. So the first value point that we can take away from Edith is that she was a seeker of truth. John Paul II calls her this in his canonization homily, that she was a seeker of truth. And her mentor, Edmund Husserl, who was her philosophy mentor and that she assisted when she went into the field of philosophy, said that Edith Stein, and I quote, was utterly authentic. There was nothing about her that was inauthentic. Husserl also encouraged her in her very authentic personality to never take anything as truth just because anybody else said so. Now, he was a Christian, but he didn't want Edith just to become a Christian because her mentors and her peers thought that she should. He said, you must be on your own path to seeking truth, and was very highly encouraged in that. And so we can take away from Edith somebody who was on the arduous journey, is what JP2 will say, of seeking truth. The second value point for Edith Stein that I think is a helpful takeaway is beauty. That beauty is an essential need of the human person. This is what Balthasar says in his Theological Aesthetics, The Glory of the Lord, about beauty, and beauty is a need. He says, our situation today shows that beauty demands for itself at least as much courage and decision as do truth and goodness. And she will not allow herself to be separated and banned from her two sisters without taking them along with herself in an act of mysterious vengeance. We can be sure that whoever sneers at her name, as if she were the ornament of a bourgeois past, whether he admits it or not, can no longer pray and will soon no longer be able to love. So I bring this up with regards to Edith Stein because Edith Stein, as I mentioned earlier, struggled with depression. And the thing that got her out of her depressive state was actually an encounter with beauty through the music of Bach at a Bach festival in Breslau. What I like about Balthasar, and why I wanted to read that little segment from Balthasar's theology, is that beauty isn't just an extra something, it's a transcendental. Any kind of encounter that we have with beauty today and always is a participation in the ultimate beauty of God. And so Edith then spent a lot of her time cultivating a life of beauty. She wrote poetry, did theater, even in the cloister, and was dedicated to the music of Bach. And I think that's something that in our world that we can really work towards recovering, a recovery of the beautiful, not just as something luxurious or nice, but as a fundamental human need found in our nature. The third value point is that she embraced her limitations. So it's kind of funny to talk about limitations when it comes to Edith Stein because she was such a brilliant philosopher. And even though, because of the fact that she was Jewish and the fact that she was a woman, was kind of barred from academic circles and denied university professorships, she actually wrote philosophy on women, essays on women, if you'd like to read and pursue this further. And that, was discussed in academic circles that she couldn't even participate in, which is really frustrating. But she said in looking at some of her limitations intellectually, which again seems crazy to me when I say it out loud, but this is her experience that I'm talking about. She had an intuition that she was building kind of the philosophical groundwork for somebody else who might come in and build on the work that she had done. What's exceptional to me about this is that she persevered in her intellectual calling, which she recognized was a true calling, and also had the humility and the intuition that somebody else would come after her and do something with her work. And that somebody else ended up being St. John Paul II with his theology of the body, his encyclical on women, Mulieris Dignitatem, on the nature and dignity of women, and his letter to women. So that's a pretty good person to have building on your work. So she in all of her humility and in embracing all her limitations, said she would proceed, she would keep moving forward, keep doing what she's doing, and not let her own limitations and her historical circumstances get in the way of what she knew God was calling her to do. The next value point is I have here is about community in the peripheries. So Edith Stein definitely had mentors in her life and took friendship very seriously. And I think especially during COVID, this is something that can be helpful for us to take friendship seriously, that friendship is also a fundamental need and probably one of the most important things in our life, if not the most important thing. So she would often write letters to her mentors and her friends and have intellectual conversations with them and conversations about faith and spirituality, being a seeker of truth. She wanted to do this with people. And she also participated in Jacques and Raisa's Thomistic circles where people, Catholic or not, would come together and have conversations about truth and beauty and goodness. And what I really love about that and bringing this up now is that to me, that's what the Festival of Friendship is. And I think that Edith would be very happy to be involved today in this way, because we're having a larger conversation together as best we can during COVID. And so she was invited by Jacques and Raissa Maritain to come to France, to their home, to their hospitality, and dialogue with people who were on the peripheries in society. So it was a gathering that exceeded your socioeconomic class, and I especially appreciate that. The last value point is the contemplative life. So while for many of us the spiritual life is something we try to fit into our busy lives, for Edith the spiritual life was of primary importance, and everything else was fit into it. So she took that very, very seriously. Well before she even became a cloistered nun, she would schedule her busy work life, and she lectured about women and the philosophy and theology of woman all over Europe until the Nazis started to put pressure on in different circles, and then she just lost her speaking gigs entirely. But she would lecture all over Europe about the role of women and about the theology of women, but would always make sure that her prayer time and her spiritual time and her pilgrimages and her retreats came first, and everything else was secondary under that. So I apologize for how quickly I'm speaking and how brief this was, but hopefully this gives you a little bit taste of Edith Stein, the boss saint. And I'm going to end reading a poem that she wrote as Sister Teresa Benedicta a Cruce. So Saint Teresa, blessed by the cross. And this is what she said, and I hope this can be a prayer and a motivation for all of us as we continue to discern our own personal vocations, and that very thing that God is calling us, that is born out of our unique, unrepeatable individual personality. Of course, the Lord leads each on her own path, and what we call fate is the artist's doing. The eternal artist who creates material for himself and forms it into images in various ways, by gentle finger strokes and by chisel blows. But he does not work on dead material. His greatest creative joy is, in fact, that under his hand the image stirs, that life pours forth to meet him, that life that he himself has placed in it, and that now answers him from within. To chisel blows or quiet finger stroke, so we collaborate with God on his work of art. If you're interested in learning more about Edith Stein, please check out her essays on women. Endow also has a study guide on Edith Stein, or feel free to check out my blog, culturalgypsy.com, and you'll find on it an 8-week meditation on Edith Stein, Seeker of Truth, and feel free to contact me if you have any questions or need any more resources on this awesome, awesome boss saint, Edith Stein.
Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure and my honor to be here with you to speak about one of the greatest saints in our modern times, Mother Teresa of Calcutta. We're all probably familiar with her many works of charity, what the sisters do and what Mother Teresa did in her life. But I would like to speak about her interior life a little bit, so we can have the opportunity to know her from the inside out, so to speak, during these few minutes. And first, I want to introduce myself. I'm Father Luis Saldaña, priest of the Archdiocese of New York, the spiritual director at St. Joseph Seminary, born in Mexico City. When God gives a charism to somebody, especially such an important charism as the one that Mother Teresa was given, it is not just a gift for the person or the congregation that these people often found, but it is a gift for each one of us. There is something there for you and for me. And we'll see that charism, which is the thirst of Jesus for souls, the experience of the thirst of Jesus for souls, it is shared to each one of us. It is for me to long for that knowledge, that awareness of the thirst of Jesus for me. So I want to speak about a few things in her life. First, to give a short biographical note. Second, to speak about some of the most important experiences in her life. the experience that she had in the train to Darjeeling, where she had that tremendous mystical experience of the presence of Jesus. And certainly you are familiar with the words, "I thirst," on the foot of the cross. If you go to any chapel of the Missionaries of Charity, you will have the inscription of Jesus' words in Calvary, "I thirst," inscribed at the bottom of the cross. And to speak about the cross is to speak about darkness. So we'll speak also about the darkness that the mother experienced, and hopefully towards the end also to speak a little bit about some of her legacy, what she leaves behind to each one of us. She was born, let's now get to the biographical notes, in Albania, in what is today Macedonia. And she used to say it, by blood I am an Albanian, by citizenship I'm an Indian, by faith I'm a Catholic nun. As to my calling, I belong to the world. As to my heart, I belong entirely to the heart of Jesus. So she was born in August 26 of 1910, and she was the youngest of her family. She was baptized with a name and a middle name, and that was Agnes Goncha. It is very curious, but that middle name, Goncha, can be translated as little flower. And in a few minutes, we'll see why is this relevant. Because later on, she will take the name, her religious name, when she joined the Sisters of Loreto, Teresa, after Teresa of Lisieux, the little flower. So that was very important for her. We will take a look at that. And she had some important experiences as a child. She would experience the tragic death of her father when she was only 8 years of age. Certainly left an important mark, leaving the family in very difficult financial circumstances. Also, we can recall that her day when she received her first communion was an important day in her life. She said that the day that she received her first communion, when she was only 5 years of age, left an impression in her soul, left already a thirst for souls. Another important aspect in her life, in her person, is what she was very short. She was only 5 feet high. And there is no doubt that our physical appearance makes an impression in ourselves, in the way we understand ourselves, and in the way people take a look at us. And certainly, and I think this can be very real, it was a way of God allowing her to know that she was nothing, that she was very small. She would say things like, "I'm just a pencil in the hands of God." And she always said, "God is using my own nothingness." So she understood that nothingness. And the fact of being so small, for her, perhaps it was a sign, a proof of that. Father Brian Koldileshkuk, whom I owe, or the world owes much of what we know about the life of Mother Teresa, speaks about important mystical experiences in her life and events in her life that we want to highlight in these few minutes. The first one is that experience in the train to Darjeeling. The second, it is that intimate sharing on the cross of Jesus Christ through the years of darkness that followed that mystical experience. So, as much as she experienced the thirst of Jesus on the cross for souls, she experienced also the abandonment of the Father that Jesus experienced on the cross. So her spirituality is certainly a spirituality of Calvary. Now, there are certainly some important, very important influences in her life. We already mentioned St Therese of the Little Flower. She takes two important things from her, her sense for mission and the little way of doing things. One of Mother's favorite phrases that she kept repeating often was precisely to do small things with great love. And So we see that Mother Teresa saw her own vocational pattern after St Thérése of Lisieux, the little flower. Again, remember her name, Concha, little flower, her religious name, Therese, after the little flower. So, unlike Mother Teresa, St Thérése of Lisieux places an important moment in that experience of the thirst of Jesus, even St Therese of Lisieux at the beginning of her conversion. And I'll cite very quickly from her. She says, and the words "thy thirst" had set aflame in me a lively and unknown ardor of love. I wanted to satiate my beloved, she writes, and I felt myself devoured by his same thirst for souls. Further on, she continues, it seemed to hear Jesus saying to me as to the Samaritan, give me to drink, and the more I gave him to drink, the more thirst of my soul grew. So she called the experience of his thirst the most precious gift and channel of his love. She would later say things like, so it's not so much our work that God wants, but he wants our love. I think that Mother Teresa will repeat as well. Another important influence for Mother Teresa is the Ignatian spirituality. Her beginnings in the religious life took place at the Sisters of Loreto in India while she was serving, working at a girls' school. And they had a strong Jesuit influence, so much that when Mother Teresa was asking a priest to give a retreat to the sisters, she would say, not just any retreat, please tell the priest to give the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius. So she really liked the methodology. Now let us touch upon, even if it's briefly, those important experiences in the life of Mother Teresa. The first one is what she called Inspiration Day, which is the experience of that she experienced of the thirst of Jesus on September 10 of 1946 in the train to Darjeeling, as she was in her way to take her spiritual exercises. And she would say this is really the beginning of the missionaries of charity. Now, that experience was kind of kept unknown for most people, or perhaps for everyone, basically until the very last moments of her life. Everyone knew that there was something important during that day. Everyone knew that had to do something with the thirst of Jesus, but nobody was aware really of the magnitude of that event and on what it implanted in the soul of Mother Teresa. So she experienced that tremendous, in a mystical way, in the thirst of Jesus for souls. And whatever she was given in a mystical way, it is given to us in prayer. And that is why we said at the beginning that when God gives a charism to the church, it's for everyone. It's not for Mother Teresa. So what is there for you and I? It is the experience of the thirst of Jesus for my love, which is an extreme form of thirst, which is an extreme form of love for each one of us. So we get back to John 19:28. I thirst, and the words of Jesus on the cross. And she would say, I thirst, Jesus said on the cross, when Jesus was deprived of every consolation, sitting in absolute poverty, left alone, despised and broken in body and soul, he spoke of his thirst, not for water, but for love, for sacrifice. Then we'll continue. Jesus is God, therefore his love, his trust is infinite. Our aim is to quench this infinite thirst of God made man, just like the adoring angels in heaven ceaselessly sing the praises of God. So the sisters, using the four vows they take, poverty, chastity, obedience, and the service to the poorest of the poor, ceaselessly quench the thirsting of God for love of souls. Now, so we have that experience that is very biblical, that has deep roots in Scripture, like, as St Teresa of Lisieux refers quite a bit to that experience of the Samaritan woman in the desert, that woman that Jesus meets, no? And the request is, give me to drink. No? That's the request place. And Jesus says, if you knew but the gift of God, and who is it that is asking you for a drink? So if you knew the gift of God. So that experience of the gift of the thirst of Jesus, it's a gift that is given to her. Every charism is a gift. So that is the gift of Jesus to her, and that is the gift of Jesus for each one of us through the experience of Mother Teresa. Another very important experience, spiritual influence in the life of Mother Teresa, is the devotion of the Sacred Heart. Another one who paves the way to Mother's spirituality is Saint Margaret Mary and the devotion of the Sacred Heart. I'll just cite very briefly from her. And she says, one of my greatest sufferings was caused by the Divine Heart, addressing to me these words, I thirst with such a terrible thirst to be loved by men in the Blessed Sacrament that this thirst consumes me. Yet I find no one trying to quench it according to my desire by some return of my love. Mercy, as beautiful as it is, it implies our failures, it implies an extraordinary activity from God that we need, but that infinite thirst of God, really, it is the very experience of the love of the whole Trinity, Mother would say, for each one of us, from the moment of our creation. God experienced a thirst for us. And then, out of the result of this, charism, the aim of the society becomes to satiate the thirst of Jesus Christ for souls, especially in the poorest of the poor. And therefore the mission of Mother Teresa, her mission, the mission of the missionaries of charity, it is precisely the free service to the poorest of the poor. And from that day in the train of Darjeeling comes not only the mission and the aim of the Society of the Missionaries of Charity of Mother Teresa, but also the spirit, which is part of her response. So what she experienced in the train to Darjeeling is that mysterious thirst of Jesus for souls, but her response will be marked by three things, which is loving trust, total surrender to God, and cheerfulness, which needs to be the spirit of the missionaries of charity. And our spirit as well, in that experience of the cross, in that experience of the thirst of Jesus on the cross for souls, we are given also the spirit by which we answer, always with a complete trust and with that tremendous cheerfulness and trust. So she would always say to the sisters to keep smiling. Says, keep smiling, smile to Jesus. Let us bring him many souls. Keep smiling. Smile at Jesus in your sufferings. For to be a missionary of charity, it is to be a cheerful victim. And I think that's what describes the spirit of Mother Teresa. Now, the last point that I wanted to touch upon is that moment of darkness. From the moment of her experience in the train to Darjeeling, she experienced nothing but darkness in her spiritual life, and that darkness was marked not by what we can call a psychological kind of a melancholic depression, none of that. St. Ignatius of Loyola will remind us that sometimes we feel, as we say, the blues in our spiritual life. Sometimes we cause it ourselves. Sometimes people come to me and say, Father, I feel desolate. I don't feel the presence of God when I pray. Well, perhaps because St. Ignatius of Loyola will say, you're not paying attention to your spiritual life. You are neglecting your times of prayer. No wonder why you feel that way. Another one can be psychological reason, as we mentioned. But Mother Teresa didn't fit that. She was always smiling. Nobody could have seen that she was living in the dark night. And that's what she experienced. She experienced the dark night of the spirit until the last day. Most people would agree that she never experienced any consolation in her life. Consolations, desolations come in the lives of each one of us. Sometimes they come mixed. Sometimes we have moments of desolations. Sometimes we're given moments of consolation in our lives. But for Mother Teresa, the moments that she experienced of darkness, after the moment of that experience in the train to Darjeeling, was always an experience of that darkness. And she would say that if I ever become a saint, it will be surely a saint of darkness. She never came to see a consolation, but it really fits with her mission. And just before I speak for a minute about her legacy, I just want to say something important about her character. Mother Teresa was a woman of tremendous determination. When she wanted something to happen, it just happened. In one occasion, they say that she was in Madrid, she was with a priest, and she wanted to go and visit the place where the homeless lived. It was getting cold, it was the winter, and this priest took her to a large warehouse, and they found certainly a lot of families, migrants, people living in tremendous poverty. And she said to him, who does this building belongs to? He said, well, it belongs to the railway company. And she said, well, we need to go to see the boss right now. And so they went to the building, the company building, and they presented themselves as like Mother Teresa. And I came to give the CEO of this a little gift. So they called the top floor. Immediately they are brought to the top floor, and she had a meeting with this man who was deeply moved because he was a believer. The gift was a miraculous medal. And then she asked, I need this land because I need this warehouse because I want to build a home. Well, said, well, maybe this is part of the railways. In fact, this is going to be made into an extension of the train station, but I know where can you do that the same day. And so he sent a few engineers that very day with her, and they found a place that also belonged to the railways, and it is where today they have this shelter for the homeless. So that was Mother Teresa. And she was a person with no pride whatsoever. Why? And this is the most important, perhaps, or one of the very important parts of her spirituality. Everything that she did, it was not her, but Mary who did it. And that's why she had no pride whatsoever. She attributed everything that she did to the hand of Mary. And now, lastly, I just wanted to say a few things about what she left behind. What she left behind, it is, as we mentioned a few minutes ago, a spirituality of Calvary, an encounter with the thirst of Jesus. That means a thirst of the love of Jesus for each one of us. And in terms of institutions, we know well that she founded the Missionaries of Charity, both active and a contemplative branch as well. She leaves us also an order of priests, the Missionaries of Charity priests. She leaves behind also an order of brothers, both contemplative and active as well. She leaves the Corpus Christi movement for priests, of which I am a member. It is an association of diocesan priests that was founded by Mother Teresa, seeking the holiness of priests. That was a great concern in her life, the holiness of priests. She leaves a group of volunteers, lay missionaries, and her co-workers. So what she leaves behind is a beautiful testimony of love for each one of us. So thank you very much for your attention this evening. May God bless you. And as she would say, Sacred Heart of Jesus, pray for us. Immaculate Heart of Mary, cause of our joy, pray for us.